What about your family? Do you know where your family's from?
Well, I can tell you that they were all around down near what they called Holmes, PA, because that's where my grandfather lived. That's where my grandmother lived. And these that you're speaking of, when I say grandfather, and these were the people that were my mother's side of the family. I never had any real knowledge of anything about my father, other than for me, I guess I must have gotten to be about maybe 15 or 16. And all of a sudden it hit me. I said, wait a minute. How is it that my mother's married name is the same name as everybody else in her family that, was like my brother? Well, how is it that her married name is Bagby, but that all the guys and whatnot, their names are Bagby? And finally, I kind of asked one of my older sisters, I said, Betty, why is it that Mom and Dad have both the same last name? And she just stared at me. And she said, okay, Holly. She said, you're not crazy. And I said, no, well, all of a sudden it hit me.
That sounds like an Aunt Betty.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Aunt Betty.
and I said, well, all of a sudden, I said, out of nowhere, it just came to me. Well, how can my mother's married name be Bagby, and how can his name be Bagby? And then she said, well, I guess you never knew that he was somebody that her mother and father took in when he was a young man. And they took him in, and basically they adopted him and gave him their last name. And somehow she, your mother, and he became attracted to each other, and they ended up getting married. And I thought that was the weirdest thing I had ever heard in my life. And I think the thing that was so weird for me was how all of a sudden it hit me. I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
She's married, and she absolutely was married to him, but it was just one of those kind of things that I had never really looked into. And then I said, well, I got to ask. And I just went on and said, well, I know which one of my sisters to ask, because she'll tell me off and then, tell me the truth. So that was it. So, there's always been a lot of stuff within families that comes up that you don't really have a full view on. But that was really hard. And then I can remember even as I got later into getting ready to get into the last part of high school, I remember a couple of people just saying, you're Bagby, right? Because, see, they were used to the Bagbys that were known to somebody else. And I'm like, yeah. Well, who was your father? And then they just would stare at me. And I'm just like, well, you got the information now. Okay? Because I have it. So, so for me, once I had the clear, and one of my mother's sisters, she also helped me to get it, because she told me, she said, I'll explain it to you better, but it's nothing that either one of them did. And that's when I got the whole story about him coming in and staying there and da-da-da-da-da. So that's what it was. It was weird.
Yeah, so that is interesting, because they grew up together.
Oh, they did. They were all in the same area together, and he was down there, and I'm like, what? But we shall see.
Okay, so that's Holmes, Pennsylvania.
Holmes, PA.
And that's Delaware County.
That's Delaware County. Now, I'm not totally sure, and I can check it out, but now I can remember them also making implications that my grandfather and them grew up in Virginia. Okay, now whether they did or not, I'm not really sure, but that's what they said. But they went to Holmes, and they never left Holmes until they were dead.